Now, every single video online is telling you the same thing. You just need to do a few different habits, a few different tips and tricks that are going to help you basically achieve the good life. If you're tired of seeing those sort of videos and you basically want to go in depth, you're not a lazy person, you're somebody who does take action, but you're just failing to understand what's going wrong in your life. On this page, we talk about deep level identity change. That's true transformation, not people who just basically want a bad attitude, want to spray a little nice perfume on it and think that all is going to be well from just doing that. We want people who basically want to go forward in their life. They want to change their mindset and they essentially want to do everything in their power to basically change their life. We talk about different subjects covering health, wealth, and relationships. I have a newsletter called The Next Chapter where on a week-to-week basis, I'm sending you frameworks to take on board which are going to radically change your life. If you're able to take these in and you do enjoy depth, then you're going to love this channel. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. And make sure to subscribe to that newsletter. Not every single moment of your life are you going to be able to sit down and watch a video like this, but every single person can find 5 to 10 minutes where they can go through an email that's going to help them apply these principles in real time. Now, make sure to watch the whole entire video, of course. There's always so much to get from it, but also make sure to join the newsletter. My name's Tino. Let's get started with the video. Something that I was never taught in school, fundamentally, is about how much our attitude impacts our social lives in every aspect of life. See, the attitude we carry in life is going to basically dictate which people want to associate with us, who become our friends, and how many people actually want to get to know us. It can impact your dating life, your emotional life, because of course you're dealing with the mental thoughts on a regular basis, and also it affects the physical reality you live in as well, because you have limitations to what you believe can be achieved. Not very many people actually emphasize this. I know there's subjects in school like psychology, but I've never really seen something that's really gone in depth and given actual social examples that basically allow us to understand this concept in depth. So I'm going to be giving this my best shot. If you think that I'm some sort of licensed psychologist, therapist, or someone that's going to help you understand this with the actual factual medical information, that's not what I do here. I just give you social examples, something that's relatable to you guys that you might have seen in your life. And if you look deeply into, the lives of maybe the people around you, you can see in others. And that helps you basically understand it in real time. And maybe if you can change some behavior traits that you've got, you're essentially able to start attracting the right people into your life. See, in life, the people you attract isn't a result of what you do. The people you attract is a result of who you are as a person. Like I told you, it's deep level identity change that basically makes the difference in your life. Now, of course, with my videos, one thing that I always like to talk about is I like to go in depth and actually go into my own life and see where my character flaws are and where I can work on my identity. And something that I've always needed to work on is my codependency. I have a very fundamental issue with seeking approval. Something I've worked on drastically before starting this video. So you guys who are watching this video, by this time, I have a lot more boundaries than I used to have when I was younger. But hey, if you're someone who's aiming for the standards that I'm aiming for, of course, I always look at it as I'm a work in progress. You should never feel that you've completely got to the end goal, that you've always got something you should work on. Remain a student at all times, and there's always something to learn. So I'm going to give you guys a story, and maybe you can find some relatability in this. Make sure to listen to the similarities, not the differences. So when I was younger, I've mentioned this in previous videos, but my childhood essentially stemmed of me moving from school to school. My mother made it a priority in her life to make sure that we didn't live in a deprived area, because she was told before she moved to the United Kingdom that if your son lives in a council flat, an estate of some sort, that it's very easy for him to actually get involved with the wrong crowd, start selling drugs, and essentially he could end up in a life of prison. This is sort of the route that many black kids were taking in those sort of environments. So what my mum would do is she would always pay for the cheapest house in the nicest neighborhood she could get. But because she was always living above her means, what would happen is that we would have to move from house to house, renting to renting. But she made sure it was a priority that, of course, we were also in decent neighborhoods that wouldn't allow me to get involved in crime and things like that. Now, because we were moving from neighborhood to neighborhood, my primary school was different to my first secondary school. My next secondary school was different to my third one, etc., etc., etc. We were always moving in different locations associated with different people. And this pretty much replicated my life later on down the line, where my life was sort of doing the geographics where I'm moving from one place to another. This stems from childhood. A lot of our behavior traits, if you go into your childhood, you're able to stem where they actually started from. But long story short, because I was always moving schools, areas, and meeting new different people in different walks of life, I would always adjust my personality to fit to the environment that I was in. This was a survival mechanism. As you know, I've mentioned in many videos that humans were tribal people. Anything that makes us feel like we stand out and we're going to be kicked out of the tribe, we're going to do everything in our power to basically make sure that we fit into the group of people that we are around. So a lot of the times I would find myself trying to watch the same shows as the people around me, just so I have things in common with them and I don't stand out too much. I wasn't confident in myself. I didn't have an identity. I wasn't grounded in any sort of real personality of my own. My personality was being shaped based off of the people around me. And of course, this did work. This did have its unfair advantages, which was that I was always able to adapt very quickly to new environments, which meant I built up the ability to make new friends. No matter where I've been, something that people have noticed about me is that I'm able to get on with a whole load of range of people. I had friends who particularly grew up in the areas that I mentioned, the sort of council estates, and they would see me being, same ethnicity as them, similar background, but I would have a little bit more social savviness than them, and they would wonder where I get that from. I don't say that to brag, but really and truly that actually came off the back of my insecurities as a child and my ability to survive in the environments that I was put in. Now, this people-pleasing sort of tendencies that I built up through my childhood, later on in life, what that ended up turning into is a character trait that basically allowed people to walk all over me. And I'll give you the very first example. Now, most of my childhood friends were very similar to me in terms of the guys, but every here and now I would make a very new friend. And the friendship wasn't built off of the foundation that we have things in common. We have, shared history in certain places. The friendships will be built off of when that person would call me and they had a problem, I was always the listening ear. I was always basically the therapist to this particular individual. If you've ever been this sort of person, you know exactly what I'm talking about. People come to you for advice because you're very good at giving advice, and you also give the advice because you know what it's like to almost feel isolated in your thoughts, and you feel like you're doing almost like a charity by basically being a listening ear to them. But something about human nature that you need to understand when it comes to people is when you fail to put a boundary on your time, people don't look at it as this person is very empathetic and take it as, a compliment to them that you're so much of a good person. They actually start to take you for granted. I remember I had one particular friend, I'm not going to go into the details because I don't want people who know me to watch this and sort of put two and two together. But I'm sure if you're savvy enough, you know who I'm talking about. But I've had people in my life who are no longer in my life now, where every single time an issue propped up, they would call me and dump their entire problems on me. And I could be having the best day of my life. Woke up that day positive, in a great mood. And the minute that I picked up the phone and started listening to this person, I could literally feel my energy levels being zapped. But I kept picking up the phone because I felt that if I didn't look out for them, then maybe I was being a bad friend. Like I said, I know where this stems from. This stemmed from my childhood. That approval-seeking characteristic that I built up from my childhood of always wanting to feel like I belong. This was something that later on showed in my life. And now I've got people who are constantly coming to me for help when they're in a low. But whenever something was positive in my life, they were never really a listening ear, the same that I was for them. And I felt that the energy I was giving to them in the friendship wasn't reciprocated. So when this is the case, what happens is you begin to build envy. So every here and now, I would naturally build up the courage to sort of suggest that I'm not happy with the dynamics of this friendship. I'd be, quite young, but I'm hinting at the fact that, listen, you always call me to sort of vent your problems and I don't really get anything out of this. But I wouldn't say it harshly, I wouldn't be transparent because like I said, I'm a codependent. it scared the hell out of me of losing the approval of somebody else. So what would end up happening is when they would hear me sort of suggesting that this person wasn't a good friend, rather than them saying, actually, Tino, I never saw it like that, I apologize. What they would do is they would actually turn the script around on me. They would say, well, if you've been holding this in this whole time, you're actually a fake friend. You should have told me this before, blah, 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 blah. And now the situation is not a situation where they're taking it as feedback. They're actually flipping on you to say that you've insulted them, you've been a fake friend this entire time, they thought you had their back, etc., etc. And now the guilt kicks in because you're being gaslit. And some of you listening to this are probably thinking, Tino, that's never happened to me. I've always had boundaries. But like I said at the start, you need to listen to the similarities, not the differences. But some of you can relate to what I'm speaking to, whether you were in a relationship with someone like this, had a close friendship, maybe even had a family member who you always seek their approval. You was always trying to be the good kid for your parents, for example, but your parent maybe wasn't the most loving parent. Or you never had the most loving upbringing from the people around you, and you were always seeking their approval. But what you end up finding is that all that investment you made in them ends up being slapped right in your face. You end up realizing that you gave so much energy to them, but what was it all for in the end if they just turned around and said that you're the issue? And at the time, because you don't actually have a boundary, you're not grounded in an identity, you don't have morals, you don't know who you are, you're always searching for somewhere to belong. What ends up happening is when they do throw these sort of insults out, rather than you actually just saying, you know what, I'm going to cut this person off, they're bad for me, you end up apologizing, similar to what I did. And for a very long time, this is something that would repeat in my cycle. Now, I will say this, the first person that did this to me was actually a woman. So at the time when this happened, this is a character trait that I associated with women. If any of you guys know, or if you've ever been friend-zoned or you've ever had a negative significant other, then you know what I'm talking about. But later on in life, I would have male friends where similar situations would happen. They would call me because they have something to talk about in their life, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, whether it's a guy calling me because he started to see this girl and he wants to tell me about the issues that she's given him and the things that are on his mind. And when I needed him, he would just brush me off. You know, my issues weren't a big deal, but whenever he would call me, I would always be the listening ear. So what you end up learning is this isn't a girl or guy issue, this is a human issue. And to take it in even more depth, what you have to do is you have to start seeing these character traits also in yourself, right? So you have to see where you've been dumping your problems on other people. And truth be told, I had situations like that where you have the friend where you never really call them up because you want to sort of catch up with them and find out how they've been. Ask them how they've genuinely getting on in life. Is there any issues they're going through? You're calling them up because you want to boast about something that's happened in your life. Whenever something positive happens, we feel that we need to actually call somebody up and celebrate this victory with someone verbally on the phone. But one thing I've sort of learned now that I'm in my 30s is that people, as much as they can be your friends, your family, your loved ones, people close to you, it's not their obligation to listen to your victories. You know, people have things going on in their life. And of course, there is a time and place where you can all sit down and talk about victories yourself. But you got to be very careful when you do this, because not every single person that hears good news happening to you is going to see it as something worth celebrating. Some people may pretend that they enjoy the news, but they actually envy all the good things that are happening in your life. And what ends up happening is that later on down the line, you find out that this envy was slowly building up in them, and then they eventually discard you, which I'll get into later on in life. But my first sort of bad attitude, an attitude that I wanted to speak about, is if you're codependent, you need to learn to set a boundary for yourself. You need to stop letting people into your life that just use and abuse you in physical or mental, emotional ways. See, I used to look at extreme examples of codependence. You know, almost look at something like the relationship between like a pimp and a girl on the street. If you think about that, that's an extreme example of a codependent relationship. She needs the pimp is out just taking her out into the streets. She's getting pimped out. he's getting money off of that. She needs him to make money because he's the one that knows the clients. That's an extreme example. But with extreme examples, it's very easy for us to point the finger. But we need to start looking at the situations in our life where we are being codependent, where we're failing to set boundaries. And if you actually look at every single moment in your life where you failed to set a boundary, there's never ever, I personally haven't heard of a moment in time where someone has given someone absolutely all of them, and eventually that person just says, do you know what, I appreciate everything you've done, and I'm sorry for taking you for granted. The end result in my life, and everyone that I've spoken to that does this, is the person who's being given all this energy and good attitude just ends up discarding you, ends up getting rid of you anyway and cutting you out of their life. So you end up thinking, what was the point of all that investment I made in the friendship? Really, there was nothing wrong with the person themselves. What it was is a problem with yourself and having a lack of boundaries. You need to learn to put boundaries, learn to put your foot down, and learn to actually be somebody who has a standard in their life. I mentioned being a codependent, but the flip side of that story is maybe you're on the other side of the spectrum, where you're the person who's a chronic complainer and you're always dumping your problems on someone else. See, every here and now we go through situations which are tough. We might lose loved ones, we might go through significant heartbreaks, we might lose jobs, friends, we end up in situations that are very negative, and we just need someone who will basically give us a shoulder to lean on, a listening ear almost. And that's okay in moderation. I'd even say be careful with that, because chronic complaining, which I'm going to explain later on, is pushing the people that you want in your life, good quality people, away. Now, when you're a chronic complainer, one thing you'll realize about your attitude in life is when you're a chronic complainer, it's very few moments in life where somebody will tell you, hey man, your attitude stinks. You need to just go away, man. You need to fix that up. You might get that from like loved ones, maybe like a family member or a really close friend if they're that sort of transparent friend that's very honest. But for the most times, when you're a very negative person, you almost emotionally isolate yourself from other people without even seeing it. It's subconscious for a lot of people. For some people, it is conscious. But very, very, very few people are conscious. Most people are subconsciously pushing people away. See, when you're a chronic complainer, like I mentioned earlier when I was speaking to the friend that would dump their problems on me and I'd feel my energy zapped, I can't explain it other than, I know this is going to turn some people off, other than it's almost like a spiritual bondage this person has where they're always attracted to negativity. And the minute they start to say all these negative things, what they're doing is they're spiritually draining somebody else. Someone else will be in a good mood and begin to slowly have their energy zapped. And when that happens to someone, rather than them addressing you, typically they just withdraw. They slowly stop picking up your calls. Whenever they see your name on the phone, they know, okay, this person's got problems. I did that. I used to look at the call rather than texting them, hey, I'm tired of you doing this. I just ignore the call. You stop meeting them up so much, you begin associating yourself with other people. See, when you're a chronic complainer, what you're doing is you don't realize this, but you're actually just pushing people away in more ways than you can ever understand. And then that builds, and because you've got ego, that's what I wanted to say, because you've got an ego and there's this ego that defends your sense of self. Your ego has a perception of who it thinks you are, and it's going to defend it till the very bitter end. That ego, when it sees people walking away from your life, rather than it thinking, do you know what, maybe this is feedback to say that I'm doing something wrong in my life, what it does is it points the finger and it says, well, something's wrong with them. So if you're someone who's a chronic complainer, then on that previous example I told you about my friend who was dumping the problems on me, you're not like me, you're like the friend who was dumping the problems. You need to be very honest with yourself. Are some of these character traits that I'm describing similar to you? Like I said, listen to the similarities, not the differences, right? And once you can see those character traits in you, you can begin to stop them, and naturally you'll start to see that you can attract the right sort of people around you. See, we always hear these sayings, birds of a feather flock together, but apart from a simple statement that tells us that good people stick with good people, it doesn't actually tell you how you can become the sort of person to be around these flock of birds which are positive, which will have a net positive impact in your life. And these are the things that I'm trying to teach you. Being a chronic complainer is something you need to break out of. Stop dumping your problems on other people. What this demonstrates to anybody who's working at a high level frequency is that you haven't matured from being a child to an adult. See, a child dumps all their problems on their parents. But when you become an adult, something that you have to psychologically do in order to mature is you have to understand that every problem you have, to an extent, it's for you to deal with. Whether that's you dealing with it yourself emotionally or you using your resources to find someone who can help you deal with it. But it's no one else's problem to deal with. It's not your friend's problem. It's not your mom's problem. It's not your dad's. It's not your significant others. It's your problem to deal with, and you need to start learning to deal with that. So number one, avoid being a chronic complainer. Number two, the pessimist. Now, there's some people who don't necessarily complain, but to the pessimist, the glass is always half full. This video was inspired by Jim Rohn's Diseases of Attitude, but it's my spin on it, on where I've seen these examples in my life. Now, the pessimist and the complainer can sound like very similar people, but they're just a little bit different. Let me explain to you what I mean. So, the pessimist is the sort of person where, let's say you come up with a really quirky idea on something that you guys should be doing, a project. They always have something negative to say. The pessimist, I want you to think about this. If you're in the workplace like me, the CFO, the finance director, this is going to be the pessimist. This person's role is basically to look at the pennies of the business and basically justify whether it's worth the risk or not. The CEO, the visionary of the business, the creative directors, whatever role it is, these people are to come up with new ideas to invest in. And rarely will you ever find that a new idea is ever going to look like a good investment to make it, because it's new. That's the whole point. It's never been tested before. So people who have things like, people who are financial directors, CFOs, you might have a significant other like this, where in a relationship, you're the person who's always willing to take the risk. They're the person that's always not willing to take the risk. It might be vice versa as well. You might be the one who really doesn't want to take the risk. Everything has to be safe. You don't want to move towns, cities. When it comes to moving house, you literally take forever. You're indecisive because you want the perfect house before making the next move. The pessimist, they don't necessarily complain, but their whole attitude, also similar to the chronic complainer, is going to slowly push people away, and they don't even see this happening. See, one character trait that I built up through my childhood, through moving to different schools, is I naturally learned that you have to be a positive person. Because if you go into a new environment and you're negative, that was the quickest way to get isolated. So another unfair advantage I had, like I said, I didn't learn this because I was a naturally talented kid. This was stuff I was doing on the back of an insecurity I had, a seeking validation character trait that I had. But what I learned is I learned to be very, very positive. And when you're very positive, in my younger days, I would see that people were naturally attracted to you. Now, what can you learn from this? See, when you're the pessimist, there is a time and place where you need to give critical feedback. You need to say, right, this isn't a good idea for this, and this reasons. But you need to learn not to always be that person. See, when you've got a bad attitude, the biggest flaw about having a bad attitude or a bad character trait that needs developing, that you might have developed from childhood or maybe later on in your life, is typically the person who has this trait cannot actually see it. And like I said, with your ego, when you are addressed and somebody does say something which truly fits your character, rather than you actually being open-minded to listening to the feedback, your ego has this self-preservation tactic where basically it hears anything that challenges the identity you have, and it basically protects it at all costs. Watch my video, Ego versus Alter Ego. I'm telling you, this concept will change your life alone. But anyway, being the pessimist, you need to avoid that. Don't be the person when people say that, let's go over here, you say, oh no, I don't like the look of this hotel. Or when you arrive at a location, a villa, for example, I used to have a friend, we get to a villa, rather than them looking at the swimming pool we have, the great views we have, they're literally looking at the concierge charging them an extra £50 for, I don't know, Wi-Fi access or something like that. Like, really, out of all the things that is available right now in front of you, that's all you can see. You can only think about that desk, that that desk assistant that charged us extra for Wi-Fi. So the pessimist, I'm not going to go too into it. You know what the pessimist is. It's pretty much self-explanatory. Do not have this one. The third character trait, which I would say is very, very dangerous, is gossip. My God, gossip. If you want to push people away without you even seeing it happen, gossiping. See, the worst part about gossiping isn't the fact that you make the good people who have good morals, good standards, you naturally push them away. That's not the bad part about gossip. Gossip attracts other gossipers. These people really stick in packs. You remember it from the dynamics of school. I always say to people, I always make comparisons with children and adults. And somebody was asking me the other day, why do you always do that? But if you actually look at the behavior traits you used to see in school, you can see them in the workplace, in the adult life. There's certain circles in your work environment. There's the gossipers, there's the pessimists, there's the complainers, there's the positive people, there's the loners who just focus on themselves. There's all sorts of different characters which you saw in school in other dynamics later on in your life as you grow up. Now, gossip is one of those things where anytime you gossip about someone else, people subconsciously or even consciously know that you're going to gossip about them. You don't want that character trait stuck to you, that you're the sort of person who gossips, right? I've had friends like this. I've had relatives pretty much like this. Whatever phone call I'm going to have, they're going to gossip about someone else in the family. See, these things happen all over. They don't just happen outside of your friendship group or your family. You should be able to see them. Some of them are even in your household. For some of you, you are the gossiper. I highly doubt if you got this far into the video that you're the gossiper. I don't think someone who really indulges in gossip is watching a video about developing their personality and changing their identity. You know, this is a very niche subject for people who are really into self-improvement. Gossip is something you need to stay away from. I've fell victim to a bit of gossip myself. The worst part about gossip as well is because you're attracting people who gossip as well. The gossip that you end up indulging in, they're going to expose you to somebody else. So let's say you say something that's an insult or you say something about somebody else. Very quickly, they're going to expose you to somebody else. That person's going to expose you to the person you were speaking about. And now look, your whole character's in question. They make a big deal. I've been in situations like this. It's embarrassing. It's one of the quickest ways for your ego to be deflated. I think the only reason that I was able to grasp that concept of ego being something that helps preserve your identity is because my ego has been deflated in so many situations where I was exposed for the fraud I am. And I'm sure there's going to be situations where I think I know it all and I'm exposed again, but I'm no longer afraid of that. I now realize that any feedback or any critical advice that comes to me is basically going to help me form that alter ego I speak about in my video. Once again, watch that video. Now, the final one, which I would say you need to avoid, there's a lot more attitudes I want to get into, but this one is the biggest one that I see in 2026 that I seem to see people still have. It's sort of grown over the years, and it's more of a problem with my generation than the generations older than me. And that's lack of taking accountability. Failing to take full responsibility for what happens in your life. This one, blaming others, is a big, big, big thing. I remember when I was a club promoter, when we would go out on a night out to Mayfair clubs in London. I've mentioned in my previous videos that Mayfair clubs were essentially these clubs where they're VIP clubs. There's two objectives they want. They want to let in table spenders, men or women, whether it is celebrities, athletes, footballers, whatever. And it wants to let in beautiful women because the beautiful women would attract the big spenders. It would have a very strict door policy where pretty much people are filtered in and out based off of looks, based off of how they dress, based off of what status they have, what value they can bring socially to the club, what they can do for the club itself. The easiest way to get into these clubs was to be a promoter and to bring the people into the club because you're always gambling when you showed up at the door as a guest of the club rather than a worker. Now, when I used to go to these clubs, because I was the club promoter and I was the person that would get people in, I would always have that one friend that wants to get into the spot, but he doesn't want to spend thousands of pounds on a table. I had multiple friends like this, multiple guys. So the way in which I could get him into the club is when I've got a group of beautiful women coming to the club, I would link him up with them outside of the club and I would say, you guys go in as a party of 8, for example, 7 girls in here. I'm putting the odds highly in his favor because when he shows up at the door, they don't know that I've linked the two together. They just think this guy might know 7 girls. That makes him look good. More of a chance for him to be let into the club. See, it's all psychological, all of this stuff. Now, when he would get in, I had one particular friend where we would get in, we would have a good time. And maybe on that particular night out, we didn't go home with a certain girl that he wanted to sleep with, or I didn't wingman him in the way he wanted. Every single time after the club, rather than him being thankful that I brought him out, I helped him get in, he would complain about these things constantly. And at the time, like I said, I seek the validation of other people. So rather than addressing this, I used to just feel guilty myself, or I've let him down. But really, this goes to what I was saying about the chronic complaining as well. When you're blaming others for things and you're never taking accountability for your own life, naturally, people just want to stop going out with you, hanging around with you. Now, for me, it was the opposite because, like I said, I was such a codependent, such a pathetic character trait of mine that I would continue seeking the approval. Or, you know what, I let you down. Even though I've moved mountains to try and get this guy inside, you know, I've really planned this out, make sure that he shows up, tell him all the door policies, the entry, make sure the girls show up at the same time as him so I can coordinate all this. Rather than a thank you at the end, it's, oh, why didn't we end up with these people? Why didn't we go to the after party? Oh, you let me down on this part of the night. And, you know, it ended up being that I enjoyed going out as a club promoter when it was just me and I was just with the women I'm bringing, the table spenders, because these people were always very, very appreciative once I got them into the club. The people closest to me were the ones who had something negative to say and blaming me for something that happened. This would also happen if I brought people out to the nightclub that I knew personally. So I would try to avoid that. I would try to get people who I have a very minimal shared history with. Maybe I met them on another night out and I told them this is what I do in my spare time. You should come out to the club. These people would appreciate everything I'd done for them on the night out. People closest to you didn't. Blaming others is a character trait you shouldn't have. Me though, I've also been the person who blames others for things that are happening in my life. See, similar to that person blaming me for the bad night out or him not going home with that particular woman, I was the person that would also blame my friends for me having a bad night. So in that example, rather than me looking at that and saying, do you know what, I just need to have a boundary. This is something that I can control. I can simply stop inviting this person out. I'd have a lot more peace of mind and I can just move on. Instead, I would be blaming them. Oh, they're always complaining, this. Like I said, it's just a matter of lacking a boundary on my side. Rather than blaming him, what I need to do is look inwards and see what's something that I can change. Because see, you're never going to change somebody else. You need to learn to focus on what you can change. What's directly in your power. So blaming others, guys, avoid it. Stop blaming your job. Stop blaming the country you live in. Stop blaming the people you're associated with. Stop blaming your tax bracket. Stop blaming the education system. Everything. There's people all walks in life that sort of always use blaming others. And like I said to you, the problem with having these character traits is people don't tell you why they're not trying to associate with you. They just slowly withdraw from you. They dismiss you. And because of this, you can't attract the right people in your life who could potentially help you open your eyes and see which direction you need to move into. See, money is a social making activity, and unless you have the right people around you, you're never going to make money. So even if you want to look at this from a selfish point of view, if you want to be somebody who achieves monumental success, you need to become the sort of person that doesn't detract the right people from your life. You need to attract the right people in your life instead. With all that being said, what are some of the traits that you need to work on? Like I said in this video, I never give you a simple, you need to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G in my videos. We go into in-depth so you can understand the concept, you can understand what I'm talking about, and you can go away and, begin to look at ways, because I don't want to basically teach you how to think. I want to inspire you to think for yourself. Later on in my videos, I'm going to be giving you things which can be quite practical, things that I personally know of. But for now, we need to get the foundation, the principles. So what are some principles you can take away from this video? First of all, you need to learn to have a sense of humor. Throughout my whole days in school, something that I never ever struggled with was learning to laugh at myself. Don't take yourself so seriously. Learn to laugh at absolutely anything. Now, I always say, if there was a TV show called The Box, there was a camera in an empty room, no furniture, nothing, just carpet, no seats, nothing. And you had to basically set a group of 4 people in there. 4 men, 4 women. And there's a camera in the corner of the box that's watching them in this room for the whole show. And let's say this show went on for 1 hour. I'm always convinced that if you set a group of random men in a room, we will find something to talk about, and most likely, we will find something to laugh about. Could be the carpet. It could be the football teams we support. Guys, we have this thing of playfully insulting each other. I don't know if all male friendship groups are like that, but from my upbringing, I know that me and the guys that I meet moving forward, even the guys that I've met in my past, people that are currently in my life, we've never had a problem with digging insults to each other, laughing at each other. And because we have that, we have the ability to almost create laughter out of nothing. We don't need a good environment, a good interior design. We can literally be in the box with a carpet, camera in the corner, and we can find something to laugh at. You need to learn to have a sense of humor. If you don't have that, I can't help you with that. You need to look at maybe improv class, look at comedy shows. That's something that I used to study. I actually study comedians through the lens of the principles I teach you in my newsletter, and you'll be able to see that. Matter of fact, I might do a video about having a sense of humor later on down the line. The next thing you need to learn to have is you need to learn to have gratitude. You need to be thankful for the things that you do have in your life. This is about being positive, like I mentioned. I don't mean you have to be absolutely ridiculously optimistic where every single thing in your life you always got the thumbs up, but you need to generally learn how to basically control your emotions and keep a positive outlook on life. Always be grateful for what you currently have and be hopeful for a better future in the head, because you see that there shapes your personality, and by having that sort of personality you're going to attract the right sorts of people. You don't do this even if you're not motivated to do this for your own good, at least do this because you'll be a better person to the people around you, right? Sense of humor, gratitude, and the final one is, this one's a bit more similar to the first two, but sort of rounds them all up. You need to learn to self-generate good emotions. I think this fundamentally is probably one of the most important character traits to have in life. See, if you're anyone like me who's ambitious, the more money you get, like Biggie Smalls said, the more problems you have. And in order for you to deal with those problems, you need to start learning how to regulate your mood. Learn what puts you in a good mood. I've got practices like meditation, I do first thing in the morning. Listening to music is one of the most effective things that I learned. I learned to listen to music, don't know, something about music makes you visualize and you end up in a good mood, like some good rap music. Jay-Z, Show Me What You Got. Listen to that song when you're in a bad mood. You can't stay in a bad mood listening to Jay-Z, Show Me What You Got. Now, self-generating good emotions is very important because, like I said, once you learn to stop dumping your problems on people, being a chronic complainer, being a gossiper, blaming others, a lot of the times you're still going to have the negative thoughts that naturally come to all of us, and you're going to have to learn to deal with them yourself. And you don't want to rely on somebody to deal with them for you. Yes, having somebody to call, pick up the phone and listen to you is useful here and now, but at the end of the day, if you're going to be someone who takes full responsibility for your life, you need to learn how to deal with these situations by yourself. And of course, look for a helping hand when you can. Don't be afraid to ask for help, but don't overcompensate it, okay? So self-generating good emotions is the next step and the most important step to do this. See, the reason I wanted to make this video is you can have all the money in the world for cars, for houses, but if you have a bad attitude, nobody's going to want to associate with you and you're going to be a very lonely person. See, as much as we can act like buying materialistic things is very important in this world, it's really the relationships we have with other people that's the most fulfilling thing. See, a lot of the stuff you buy it for the admiration of other people. So when you actually learn that people are the most important things in life, what you want to do is you want to learn to give value to other people. And sometimes the value doesn't have to come in terms of money, financial success, or what you do for them, or the listening ear. The value could just be that you're generally a good person to be around. You've got a positive attitude, and the people you want to attract, you have to learn to embody the character traits of the people you want to attract. See, it's easy to trick someone that you're a good person, but eventually once they start to see your real personality, they're going to slowly push you away, and you're going to always wonder why you struggle to make real friends. And you're going to be like everybody's fake instead of addressing the real situation is you struggle to create real meaningful relationships in your life. What I want you to take away from this video is I want you to look at all the friendships you have in your life. Like I said, we need to start getting to the sort of person you are, which parts of you need to change. I want you to start asking your friends, your loved ones, close people around you, what do you actually like about me? You need to see the good traits that they currently like. Get some honest friends too. And also say, what are some of the things that I could be changing? Now, some of these guys won't tell you directly, especially if you're like the chronic complainer or you blame other people. They'll be scared to instigate an argument with you, so maybe they won't tell you. But you need to start seeing the common themes in your life. Do you draw people away? Do you draw them in? Are you always giving people your time? Whether that's lending money, being a listening ear, a shoulder to cry on, but never receiving that same love back. When it's time for you and you're in the mud and you need a helping hand, no one's there to help you out. Maybe you're like me. You have a codependency problem, seeking approval. Maybe you're the complainer. I want you to start speaking to the people around you and ask them what they actually like about you. What are some character traits you have which you could improve on? Next time you're having a phone call with somebody, rather than you talking about yourself, I want you to have a genuine interest in what's going on in their life. See, most conversations you have, I'm going to give you something to take away from this video. I want you next time when you start a conversation with somebody new, one of your friends, I want you to watch how quickly, they turn the conversation about themselves. You'll be talking and you will literally see in their eyes they're switching off and waiting for their opportunity to speak. I want you to be the opposite. And I know you're thinking, why would I do the opposite, Tino? They just talk about themselves. No, because you are what you attract. I want you now to go into your friendships, the next relationships that you have in your life, and I want you to be the listening ear and just say, do you know what, guys? What's going on in your life? Don't overdo it. Don't always be there, but genuinely have an interest in their life before you begin speaking about yourself. And wait for them to instigate that cue for you to speak about yourself. Start doing that a little bit more. Start observing it in other people, but I always emphasize that you need to see it in yourself, the character traits you have which are flawed. Because it's very easy to watch these videos and point the finger, but real identity change starts with people who can point at themselves and see what they need to change. Because you can only ever really change yourself. I'm going to leave that there, guys. Very in-depth subject. I've got a newsletter which is going to cover this in a lot more details. We're going to be going into more principles as this channel goes on. We're still in the early days. I have so many ideas coming into my head all the time. And like I said, if you're looking for an expert, I explain in videos, explaining concepts with facts, statistics. That's not me. I give you social examples. I'm looking for people who want to go in depth, have some sort of actual real life examples that they can relate to. That's what this channel's for. I don't always have the perfect delivery, but what I always do is make sure that I go in depth. I don't just give you surface level advice like other videos. There's plenty of that out there. This is for people who actually can think for themselves, who aren't lazy and are going to implement some of the concepts that I'm teaching them today. So make sure to subscribe to the channel. My name's Tino and I'll see you guys in the next video. Let's go.